On today's Olympic Hockey Daily, presented by Locked On NHL, we're talking to Stephen Ellis from the Hockey News to ask where this tournament is headed and get his gold medal predictions for the women's side. Plus, we've got a bronze medal winner on the women's side and some tournament upsets on the men's side to talk about.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Olympic hockey edition of Locked On NHL. I'm Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Ann Kimmel of Locked On Predators. Where can people find you, Ann?
You can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
How are you feeling today? And so many crazy games, especially on the men's side.
Well, if the time of the games wasn't tough enough, then the results of the game were also a little bit draining. So great hockey action. I'm a little tired from it.
Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and you can watch us over on YouTube. Speaking of those crazy games, man, I will say we're going to talk about the bronze medal game in a sec on the women's side, but I do want to say there were a lot of salty Canadians who said something about the men's USA team losing to Slovakia. And I'm not going to lie. I think it's a good thing for hockey, the way it turned out. But It was nice, I would say, to see Canada suffer the same results to Sweden just because of the saltiness.
Yes, no, you got to be careful who you poke fun at, because all of a sudden that could be you. And that's exactly what happened today.
Yeah, we will get into both of those games momentarily, but we have a bronze medal winner in the women's tournament, and that is the team from Finland defeating Switzerland 4-0. This game was nowhere near as close as I think both of us thought it was going to be.
Agreed. Yes. I really felt like this was going to be a very evenly matched, bronze medal round. I felt like it could go either way if just one or two pieces kind of stepped up for Switzerland. And honestly, the Finns just dominated this game from start to finish.
Yeah, especially on the defensive side. And we had talked about this game, one of the keys to the game for Switzerland to get past this Finnish team that has objectively a lot more depth to it is to have their top players step up, maybe a couple of additional players, create some more offensive chances. And they just couldn't do it. The Finns just swarmed them. And when we talked about the Finnish team, their top players absolutely did step up.
Oh my gosh, they had a phenomenal offensive showing. Susanna Tapani, Nelly Lehtinen, Michelle Carvinen all scored. And these are people who have had strong tournaments and just continued in the bronze medal match. I think Finland peaked at such the perfect time. And I think you're seeing, if you look at the team from the beginning of the tournament and this bronze medal winning game, they just have elevated their game every step of the way. And their big players consistently played big.
They did. And, Nelly Leihtinen's shot was an absolute rocket. That was a power play goal.
Oh, yes.
And then Susanna Tapani's goal was shorthanded. So they were capitalizing in all situations. And man, the Finns outshot them 47-15. And I think that says a lot about the balance in that game. And it was just an impressive performance overall, and could not be happier for this team from Finland.
Yeah, I felt like they absolutely earned the bronze medal all the way through this tournament. They've improved and consistently improved. And then in this game, like you said, it was just a dominant performance. So we did have some upsets on the men's side. We maybe didn't see coming. USA versus Slovakia. This game was intense, and it was a late night game for us here in North America. So it was well into the early morning because we had to go to a shootout to get a win in this game. Very fast paced, back and forth game. These are two teams that really appeared to be very evenly matched, which I think surprised a lot of people. But if you watch the Slovakian team through this tournament, maybe shouldn't have been too surprised because they really have had flashes of some strong performances. Slovakia went up 1-0 in the first period. Slavkovsky had a goal, which I think his tournament has done nothing but benefit him as we look ahead for his future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things about Slovakia that I think people underestimated is that, especially if you looked at that last preliminary match they played, as well as the more recent game against Germany, they were just able to defensively shut Germany down completely. And they were physical. They used their size and they used their sticks. And I think that it was going to be tough for Team USA to get goals in this game, no matter what. And they just sort of hung in there and then made it happen at the end of regulation.
Yep. Well, and it was a little bit frustrating because the USA wasn't able to convert on some of their power play opportunities that they had. And so there were some missed opportunities, but also you have to say that Patrick Rebar had a great game in goal, and so did Strauss-Mann, also really strong in goal for Team USA. But in the end, went to overtime. Thought maybe in overtime the United States, was going to clinch the win because Maddie Berniers had 3 or 4 really good looks. Oh my goodness. It was so close. So frustrating, but just could not find the back of the net. And the game went to a shootout. And finally, in the last round of the shootout, then Peter Cehlarik scored and the Slovakian team advances. Some people kind of squawky online about whether Maddie Berniers should have been in the shootout, seeing as he was, playing so well in overtime. But just they had their shootout lineup already drawn up. So he did not get the call. So that's how that one went. And I think it really surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it surprised me too, but finding out that information afterwards that they had a set lineup and order, sometimes that kind of routine with the shootout and knowing ahead of time is better for the shooter. So I can certainly understand why they kept to what their list was ahead of time. And, again, that's just kind of a coach's call at that point, and it didn't go their way. But yeah, Slovakia absolutely deserved that. On the other side of the surprise winners here, maybe not huge surprise, but a surprise, I think, to a lot of people. Canada was defeated by Sweden 2-0 in, I think, what was a pretty phenomenal defensive effort from Team Sweden. And they wound up out shooting Canada in this game. And it was a real physical back and forth battle for 2 full periods of this game. There was no scoring until the third period. Lucas Wallmark scored. There was a turnover from Canada in their own end. And Wallmark's shot went off Tyler Wotherspoon's stick.
Oh, gosh.
Past Matt Tompkins into the net. And Tyler Wotherspoon played for a couple of years with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, the Flyers AHL affiliate. So I'm pretty familiar with him. And he's such a good guy and works really hard. And my heart goes out to him. I think that, it's going to hurt for a while, probably. And I hope he knows that, it's just kind of a fluke. These things happen. He was trying to get a stick in to block the shot and just an unfortunate redirection there. But yeah, and they just held it down for the rest of the game. And lo and behold, we have no North American teams in the medals.
Well, and I don't know that anybody expected that to be the result, but these were 2 really great games, and you have to hand it to Slovakia and Sweden because they played great games. And, we're going to have to watch and see what comes next because it will not be USA Canada in the men's medal round.
No, we will have Finland versus Slovakia. Finland defeated Switzerland in their quarterfinal match 5-1. And then Sweden will be facing ROC in their semifinal. ROC defeated the upstart Denmark team 3-1. Ivan Fedotov was in net, stopped 17 of 18 shots, but Frans Nielsen at least got a goal for Denmark. They tried so hard. It was a great effort because it was 2-1 until the very end of the game, and Denmark poured it on as best they could in the third. They had 12 shots on goal in that third period compared to 6 in the first 2 periods total. So, they were in it until the bitter end, but unfortunately, they just could not solve Fedotov.
Yep. And he's had such a great tournament. So kudos to him. It'll be great to watch him in the next round and see how he does.
Well, we'll talk more about those semifinals on tomorrow's show. And we've got a great conversation with Stephen Ellis from the Hockey News coming up next. We talked to him before some of these quarterfinals. So it's a little bit more of a general conversation about the tournament, but so much great information and insight. And he gives his prediction of the women's gold medal winner. So you'll have to see if he gets it right. And so we'll be presenting that interview up next. But first, I usually give up on my New Year's resolutions, but this year I'm sticking to it thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating Built Bars. And have you tried their puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They're the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're such a treat. And they're a fan favorite with some incredible flavors like cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. And all Built Bars, including those puffs, are covered in 100% real chocolate. If you go to built.com and scroll down to their macros chart, you're going to be blown away. They're high protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And if you compare that to a candy bar, that usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Their regular bars have so many delicious flavors as well. I like the coconut and mint brownie, but they have a special flavor this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They've got new flavors coming out all the time. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Once again, thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. All right. So we've been having lots of great guests on the show over the course of the Olympics. And I don't think it would have been a real Olympics daily without our guest coming up, an absolute legend in terms of coverage, especially on Twitter. And we will get to that. We are thrilled to welcome from the Hockey News, Stephen Ellis. Welcome.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. Great to have you.
Yeah, it's been a fun tournament and not a lot of sleep, not a lot of, and I'm assuming it's the same for you guys.
We feel that.
Yeah, lots of fun, lots of coffee is the motto. All right, so obviously you're a well-respected hockey journalist first and foremost, but I have to ask up front about the MS Paint drawings on Twitter. What made you start them, and how do you manage to get them so accurate?
So it was back the World Juniors a couple of years ago, 2020. I got some DMCA's complaints from one of the broadcasters of the World Juniors, and it was a shame because the person who was actually handing it out was one of my former roommates, and I was friends with them. But you can read, but what I don't know if they knew this, but when you send a DMCA complaint, you can read what they say. And the thing was, please shut this account down. And I'm like, no, you're not shutting my account down. So I sent a bunch of angry emails back, and they said, okay, well, you can like put our watermark on the videos. And I basically said, screw you, and just kind of did my own thing. So I've kind of stuck with that. And then the Olympics, there's so many rights holders. So you pretty much your video clips, you can't really do it anyways. Like I've even seen like the actual rights holders clips get DMCA complaints from themselves
Oh
for takedown
gosh.
notices, which is kind of hilarious. Like it's like automatic. So it's kind of just been fun, and there's a little less of an audience at 3:40 in the morning when you get two European teams, but it is what it is, I guess.
They are much appreciated, just so you
They
know. They
are.
are they are artwork. They are much appreciated. So as far as the hockey goes, I guess we should probably talk about that. Do you think any of the women's teams really took a step forward in this tournament and have done something that they're going to be able to build on?
For me, the one team that really stood out there was Japan, and obviously this is a team that's kind of been hit or miss internationally, but they showed really that they can kind of just hang. Like obviously it's kind of a tough to really evaluate how every team is when you've split it up into two groups where it's the top teams in one and then the bottom teams in the other, and then the top teams are almost like a two-tier system with Canada, USA, and then the rest. But like Japan, I think really impressed me. Denmark, that's just a hockey nation that continues to grow on both sides, men's and women's. And it's been I think regardless of what happens, obviously the women's side's over, but it doesn't matter what happens with the men's side. They can look at both and say, this was such a successful tournament. So that's been really cool to see. But like I thought the Group B play was great. I think that like the games were really competitive, and it's not like we were seeing like a lot of like 17 to 15 shots. Like we were seeing like 30 and 30, and whether that's a sign of some of the teams not having great defense. The fact is the offense was a lot of fun, and the goaltending was really good too in a lot of the cases there. So I'd say like for sure Japan and Denmark were the two to look at and say that there were some big strides. And then the Czech Republic, obviously, got to see how they played in that the game against the Americans. And I think that was one where no one really expected them to be that competitive a team like that. And goaltending really matters in this tournament, and they got it really when it mattered. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, but I'd say maybe those are the three teams that really kind of caught my attention and said, they definitely impressed because like the Women's World Championship, like they haven't always had it every year, and obviously they're going to be bringing it back in an Olympic year, which is great. But some of these teams are playing a lot less, and obviously they don't have centralization, so there's a lot less time for them to kind of prepare compared to a Canada versus USA situation. So the fact that those teams can kind of come here and compete with a lot less experience, a lot less resources, and do what they do, I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder if some of the countries that don't have a centralization process, somehow find the funds and actually start doing it, because I think that would make a big difference.
I agree. Like that's kind of the like in the spirit of the games, that's not something you really want to have to do, because like that was the kind of the argument against the Soviets for so long. It's like, well, they were centralized and they were so good, and look at this. It's like it's a dominant thing. The idea of these things were always to take the best players from the club teams, and that's kind of the European way of doing it. But it's something where it would probably make them stronger. Now that doesn't also necessarily help like players that are kind of on the outside looking in. Like there are some really good players on both Canada and USA side that could have been there and could have been quality players for the Olympics, but weren't part of the centralization as they're doing college or they're playing in league play. And I think that kind of excludes them from that. But if you're going to try to be the best, it's kind of the way you got to do it. And whether or not that's the solution long term, I don't know. But I think that'd be something where for some of these teams, if they really want to take a huge step and be the consistent third place team, that's kind of maybe how you have to do it.
So on the men's side of the fence, do you think the right teams wound up in the quarterfinals, or is this tournament just a crapshoot and it's hard to tell anyway?
I love this. So I love 2018. I thought that was a lot of fun because of how much uncertainty there was, and it was kind of a roll of a dice. And this year, I'd say there's even more. You look at it, and like Switzerland being the Czech Republic isn't considered like a big like underdog situation. But when you look at how the two teams played in the round robin, Switzerland being the Czech Republic is a bit of surprise. Winning your first game of the tournament in an elimination game is typically not something that's afforded to you in an international tournament. You usually don't get to that part without a win. But I think that's been pretty cool to see those guys. But in terms of like looking at it, the no Czech Republic and no Germany in the quarterfinals is kind of crazy, considering they were both in the Final Four and they were in the losing end of both their medal games, but they made it to the medal games. And I think that is kind of indicative of just how competitive this group is. Where I put out a tweet today. It's like, who's the favorite? I don't even know at this point. And we've been watching this tournament for over a week. It's like you look at the American team and they played really well and maybe better than a lot of people thought. But then you look at their competition and it's like, well, Slovakia just seems to kind of just continue to be there. They're not easy to roll over. The Slovakia could easily win the game. And Canada and they maybe didn't dominate the games against China like everyone expected, but at the same time, I think there were some promising signs. They got a lot of special teams work, that's for sure, and they kind of learned what not to do. But like, I know some Canadian fans are saying, "Oh, we didn't blow out China." It's like, yeah, well, neither did Germany, and obviously Germany didn't make it. The Americans were the only team that did, but China did. If you watch how China attacked their first game compared to their last game, they were a completely different team.
I would say so.
They figured it out, and obviously the fact that they didn't get blown out completely is a good sign. Now, granted, like, will we see this team ever play internationally again? I doubt it. Most of these guys, that was kind of their one and done. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But otherwise, I'd say, yeah, it's kind of like the teams we expected. Russia was nowhere as good as I think a lot of people were projecting them to be. They weren't my gold medal pick, because for while they've got this team full of KHLers, well, like a lot of these teams do. Like Latvia is pretty much full of KHLs. Now, not as good KHLers, but it's like this whole thing of they're from the KHL, they're going to be great. I think is kind of something people kind of hang their heads on, and it's not kind of representative of how good Switzerland's league is, Finland's league, and things like that. So I'd say that they were kind of maybe the disappointing team, which is hard to say when they got points in every single game, but they scored 3 goals against Switzerland and Denmark. That's not good. One of them being an empty netter, or one of them being a fluky, like, banking off a defenseman goal. And then they went on, scored a lot of goals against the Czechs, but they lost. So those are situations when you look at that and say Russia should have been better. But otherwise, I'd say, yeah, we probably got the best 8 teams, and that's just making the quarterfinals. Like, it's hard to predict that. It's going to be hard to predict.
Yeah. Are there any players that you've seen that have stood out to you that maybe play in European leagues or that played for Team China that you think did enough or have done enough in this tournament to earn maybe a look from some North American NHL teams?
See, it's tough because there hasn't really been like this anybody who's kind of like dominated this tournament. When you look at the top scoring player in the tournament, it's Adam Tambolini, and he got 5 of his 7 points in one game. So it's like there's no one been kind of really shining. The one name that, like, he's already had an opportunity in NHL, but I think was just impressive every game was Roman Cervenka from Czech Republic. I thought he looked really good, and he was a team's top scorer. I believe he was like second or third in scoring after the qualification round, so he looked good. Finland had some interesting players. Sakari Meninainen, I thought, was good. I think maybe his kind of day is past in the NHL, but he's someone who would have. Who's really impressive. I know that I've been a huge fan of Leonardo Giannoni, the Swiss goalie, for a long time, former HC Davos star, and he was a Spengler Cup legend. But he's kind of a little older in his career, won't have a shot. But someone who I've really liked, again, goes to Sebastian Dahm, Denmark, has been so important. The one name to definitely watch, though, is Ivan Fedotov, the Philadelphia Flyers goalie, and his stats took a bit of a nosedive. His stats took a bit of a nosedive in the game against the Czech Republic, and a lot of that was not his fault. They were down for a 5-minute penalty that kind of just changed the course of the game against the Czechs. But he went out and got their 2 shutouts. Granted, they were not the busiest at games, but Switzerland put on a lot of pressure, and especially late, and he stood up really well. So a 6'8" goalie, he is, I think, 25 or 26. So he's like, I almost feel like if he was going to come to the NHL, he would have, but he is going to be a free agent this year. And that is key to see if he ends up coming back. Now, if he goes out there and lays a stinker in the next game or doesn't even play, like, I think that whole mentality changes. You don't want to evaluate players too much in a short tournament, and this is a hard one to really do. Like, I feel like last time there were more like European prospects that were really, really impressive than this year. Because no one is really, we're not getting these blowouts. These are really tight games, and that's also just kind of a message of how competitive it is. There aren't a lot of teams that can say we have a one player that's going to be the game changer, so it's been kind of fun to see that parity. But I think it's almost still too early to say. The tournament's like the meat of it's over. It's now we're getting to the end of it. But I don't know if there's been anyone that's kind of really shocked me enough to be like, yeah, this guy has to get an NHL deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also host the Flyer show on the Locked On Network, so we've been keeping a pretty close eye on Fedotov for the last couple of years, and I think 1 year in the AHL would do him a lot of good, and he could potentially be a backup after that. But
Yeah, and it helps that the
time,
Flyers kind of have a bunch of
yeah,
goalies that are going to free agency too, or like RFAs and stuff. So there are opportunities for him to kind of take or to
yeah, he could
force him in.
leapfrog.
Yeah.
He could totally leapfrog some of the goalie depth that the Flyers have. So very much looking forward to seeing what happens with him.
Yeah, so I think the thing is like the game against Denmark wasn't too like he didn't get a ton of shots against in that game, but he was good when they needed to be. And I guess it's how important is he going to be for Russia going forward? This is something where he didn't have a lot of experience with the national team, and it was like, was he going to go out there and like was he just playing the first game and they were going to maybe put someone else in, like Alexander Semenov? But in reality, I think that he's been good enough. He just needs to be really important going down because it's a Russian team that's finding it pretty hard to really score at will, like a lot of people thought they may have been able to do.
So in addition to some of those European players, obviously we have a few of the top NHL prospects that have already been drafted, playing mostly on Team USA and Canada. How do you think like your Owen Power, Mason McTavish, Sean Farrell, Jake Sanderson have been playing?
Well, Sean Farrell obviously I think he's second place right now in scoring, and a lot of those points did come against China in that 8-0 win. But I think he's been pretty solid throughout. Like, it's a guy who maybe not a top 6 player in the NHL, but someone who could be a good impactful third line player and a good third line player. And so I thought he's been looking good. One name I've been watching a lot is Ben Mayers, who also is playing with Sean Farrell, NCAA player who's just putting on a clinic in the NCAA and then having a great Olympic tournament where not a lot of people kind of expected that. Juraj Slafkovsky, obviously, just fantastic for Slovakia. I don't think anyone really expected him to be as important as he was because he wasn't playing a ton of minutes in the first few games. He's been good. Simon Nemec has been kind of relegated to like the 7th defenseman in Slovakia, which has kind of been a bummer. I wanted to see more of him, and we know he could play well against men. I thought between those two, he'd be the better one against the men. I think Mason McTavish has been good. He just hasn't really racked up the points, but he's been getting those opportunities. He's been involved. He's been an impactful player, so I think that's good. The one guy that really hasn't impressed me a lot is Owen Power. He's getting a lot of ice time, but it's like he's making a lot of mistakes. Now, making those mistakes against China is one thing, and it did actually hurt him. He did give away, I believe it was the second goal, but he needs to be a bit more. Actually, I believe it was the first goal, but he needed to be a bit more consistent in this tournament. Like we saw him how good he was at the World Championship against, I'd say, a little higher quality of competition with the NHLers thrown in, and I thought he played really well there. I feel like this is almost a step a little bit down, but not in a huge way. So Power has done his whole career, whether like I watched him play when he was 14, 15 at Mississauga, and he was someone where like when the big games were on, he played really, really well. He kind of like showed up, and we saw that at the World Championship. So he's got that opportunity. He's going to have to be really important. He's been one of the heavy minute crunchers. I believe he's leading the team in ice time. But it's also been a situation where Canada's ice time has been pretty evenly distributed. He's been able to learn from some pretty good veteran defensemen up there. I think you see him talking to Maxime Moreau a lot, who is kind of Hockey Canada's like go-to defenseman whenever they go to an international event without NHLers. And that experience, I think, is pretty good. So I would have liked to see a bit more out of him, but I'm not too worried about him. We know kind of just from his body of work why he became the number 1 prospect last year.
So we want you to put on your prediction hat for the women's gold medal game. How do you see that going, and what do you think? Who's going to come out on top in this gold medal match?
See, it's really tough because it always kind of feels like a coin flip when we're talking about these two teams because we know their history. But I don't think at this point of the tournament we expected Canada to have almost double the goals as the Americans. They've been kind of just out there crushing everybody. Those 11 goal games and the 110 goal game, like they've been doing that really well. And the Americans have not been able to score kind of at will like Canada. Now, we also saw that if you go back at that game that they played in the round robin, I'd say the Americans were the better team. They just ran into the greatest goalie performance we've ever seen in that tournament, which kind of shaked everything up there. But the Americans had over 50 shots. They had pretty much double the shots that Canada did. Canada's scoring efficiency has been good, but also like they've got, I believe, like 10 of the top 15 scorers are from Canada. So it's been very distributed very well for this team. They got defensemen involved. Obviously, Sarah Fillier has been outstanding.
Yes.
Sarah Nurse has been Sarah Nurse is better than I thought. We see Sarah Nurse, and she's not typically one of the top scorers in these tournaments, but she's leading at this point, which I think is just awesome. She's having such a great tournament. And on the Canadian broadcast, I'm pretty sure she's in every commercial we have here, which is kind of funny. But she's definitely the most marketable player that's going on in Canada. But I'd say if we're looking at how this tournament's gone, Canada would be the favorite. But we also have that's underestimating the Americans, I think, way too much. We know how good that they are when the games are on the line. They've been the better team in the last decade. I still think, though, it's hard to deny how good Canada's been. It's I think goals wise, this is the most they've ever scored in a tournament. It's like the record, and they've been doing it against like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th ranked teams. So it's not like they're going out there and just getting all their goals against like China or Denmark. But they're doing it against the teams that are battling for bronze. And I think that alone should give them kind of a bit of a bit of advantage. But we're talking a 1-goal game here. It's going to be like 3-2 in overtime or something like that. The United States are not going to back down. I think the big thing there has been USA's goaltending. Like they've kind of run through all their goalies, and it's not even totally like. I don't know if there's a super clear number one based off the performances of this tournament, but I think
feels like they're going with Cavallini, but.
See, that would make sense. But again, it's been kind of almost like Canada hasn't. I wouldn't say it's been a mess per se, but it's like it's not as clear as okay, Desbiens like playing out of her mind for Canada. We know she's going to be
right.
There, but, it's the goaltending's been better in Canada. Statistically, Canada's been better in almost all the categories. But it's like that's discounting the Americans for no reason. We just know how good they are in these gold medal games, and they won in 2018 when I think a lot of people expected Canada to win that one. So I still think though Canada's probably going to win. It's going to be a 1-goal game, or like the Americans pull their goalie late and it's going to be like 4-2 or something. It's going to be a lot of fun. These games are typically gold medal games here. Are not super high scoring games between these two teams. They really lock it down, and I think this is going to be the game of the Olympics, no question.
Well, at least for me, I'm obviously rooting for Team USA, but Canada has, I think, proven that they're the dominant team in this tournament, and if they win, like absolute respect, and they would absolutely deserve it. So for some reason this time around, I'm just feeling like, I think Canada can win this one and it'll be okay.
It's look at the World Championship when there's many times where we thought Canada may have had the edge there, and the Americans are like, nope. It's USA is such a good team, and it's like I wish we could get like a best of 3 series, because then it would be really cool to see how this really kind of determined how this was going to go. I think regardless, it's going to be a really close game where if the Americans can out defense Canada or out defense Canada, that changes everything, because we know that the skill is matchable on both ends. It just when Canada's road to this game has been a lot of blowouts, and the Americans not necessarily haven't had that same luxury, or a lot of their goals come in the late ends of the game. It's statistically it's hard to go against Canada, but that's almost like if you're betting on the game, it's like, well, then that's good money on the Americans.
For sure.
Well, Stephen, this has been tremendous. Lots of good information. And again, you've just are always a pleasure to observe as you're covering international hockey. And can't wait to see how you draw the final game-winning goal for that gold medal game for the women's tournament. And thank you so much for joining us. So where can people find you out there?
For sure, yeah. Stephen Ellis THN, my Twitter account, and then you'll basically up until about noon, you will pretty much only see my stories on the front page of the website as I post about every single game going on, quarterfinals, semifinals, gold medal, and both tournaments.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Once again, thank you to Stephen Ellis for joining us on the show today. Such a fun conversation. And I loved his story about why he started making those drawings on Twitter.
That's the best.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with the women's gold medal reactions and a men's semifinal preview. Have a great day, everyone.